Yesterday's prophecies, today's headlines. This is the Hal Lindsey Report. And now, Hal Lindsey.
Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Hal Lindsey Report. A few days ago, the Earth's northern hemisphere felt like it was sizzling on a hot griddle. The global warming crowd seemed thrilled. They saw the hot weather as confirmation of their religion, the high church of climate change. In the past, its proponents have manipulated data to the point of blatant lying. And their goals are clearly more political than ecological. After the Great Flood, God made a promise to humanity. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. Seasons will remain, but anyone who stepped outside during the last heat wave knows that lately the weather has been downright weird. And that's exactly what the Bible says to expect as we approach the time of the Lord's return. The Washington Post ran a story last week with the headline, "Red Hot Planet, All-Time Heat Records Have Been Set All Over the World During the Past Week." The article was first published on a Tuesday, but had to be changed Wednesday. Then it had to be changed again Thursday and Friday. On each of those days, all-time record temperatures were broken all around the world. The article begins from the normally mild summer climes of Ireland, Scotland, and Canada, to the scorching Middle East to Southern California. Numerous locations in the Northern Hemisphere have witnessed their hottest weather ever recorded over the past week. The heat wave killed 54 people in southern Quebec. In northern Siberia, temperatures soared 40 degrees higher than normal. Africa saw the highest temperature ever verified on that continent. This wasn't your ordinary heat wave, but a global event that included Europe, Asia, the Middle East, and North America. Weather and Bible prophecy are profoundly linked. For instance, both are connected with God's judgment. In several passages, the Lord warned that disobedience to Him results in drought. Isaiah chapter 24 tells us of a future judgment on the entire planet. The Lord lays the earth waste, devastating it, distorts its surface, and scattered its inhabitants. The earth mourns and withers, the world fades and withers. The inhabitants of the earth are burned. This burning may refer to nuclear war and the devastating, almost unending fires that follow. But it also seems to include weather phenomena. Another verse in the same chapter says that grapevines will wilt as a result of human disobedience to God. The chapter predicts a worldwide shortage of wine. That implies drought on a planetary scale. Revelation chapter 16 verse 8 tells about something that will happen during the tribulation. And the fourth angel poured out his bowl upon the sun, and it was given to it to scorch men with fire. This is not talking about nuclear war or man-made bombs. It's talking about violent sunlight. That hasn't happened yet, but the earth seems to be getting a foretaste of it. When Jesus gave his disciples signs to look for before his return, he told about weather at sea so extreme that it will disturb the nations. And there will be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars, and upon the earth dismay among nations in perplexity at the roaring of the sea and the waves. It sounds like future hurricanes will ravage the world's coast like never before. And we seem to be seeing the beginning of it. Climate refers to meteorological patterns over long periods of time. Climate changes slowly, but weather changes minute by minute. The Bible tells us we can expect to see an increase in strange weather, but the worst will not come until the time of the tribulation. And if you are in Christ, by then you will be gone.
Hal Lindsey is pleased to present his latest teaching series, God's Outline of History. In this set of 13 audio compact discs, Hal Lindsey will guide you on a scriptural journey from the Garden of Eden to the Millennium and Last Judgment. You will learn how God views events here on earth. You can receive this informative and inspiring series of 13 audio CDs for only $49.99 plus shipping and handling. Order God's Outline of History by writing to Hal Lindsey Media Ministries, P.O. Box 470470, Tulsa, Oklahoma 74147. You can also order online at hallindsey.com or by phoning toll-free 1-888-RAPTURE. Order God's Outline of History today.
On July 2nd, 7 former U.S. ambassadors to the United Nations sent a joint letter to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. They asked for the United States to restore full funding to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, usually called UNRWA. Back in January, the United States announced a 50% cut in the support of the agency. Since UNRWA's creation in 1949, the U.S. has been its primary source of funding. It has contributed nearly $5 billion to the agency. UNRWA was supposed to help refugees, but its effect has been to keep them imprisoned in refugee camps. The camps were initially created for political purposes. Sadly, they have also been perpetuated for political purposes. In a column last week in the Jerusalem Post, Caroline Glick wrote, UNRWA and its supporters present the agency as an organization dedicated to supporting Palestinian refugees. But this is a lie. UNRWA is a political warfare organization that deliberately perpetuates the misery of innocent people. It indoctrinates them from the cradle to the grave to support and engage in terrorism and genocide against the Jewish state and its people. It exists not to help the descendants of the Arabs who left Israel at its inception. It exists as a tool of political warfare in the never-ending war to annihilate the Jewish state. The mission of UNRWA is fundamentally inhumane. In actual reality, it does not seek to get people out of refugee camps and into mainstream society. It seeks to keep them in refugee camps so that they can continue to serve as political pawns. Want proof? How about this? UNRWA has existed for almost 70 years. In that time, it has never settled any refugees. UNRWA schools indoctrinate children to despise Israel. They encourage terrorism by praising terrorists, Nazis, and the annihilation of the Jews. And U.S. taxpayer dollars pay the salary of those teachers. In fact, the UNRWA payroll is loaded with avowed Hamas terrorists. Their schools and hospitals are used to house missiles and missile launchers. UNRWA camps are filthy, run down, and dangerous. Even pro-Palestinian organizations claim that children are not safe on the playgrounds. Defense for Children International says UNRWA camps place children at risk. Those risks include exposure to a risk of death and injury, drug addiction, sexual exploitation, and abuse. Folks, these camps are not working, and after 70 years, they need to be closed. The refugees need to be absorbed into the societies around them. When the U.S. State Department cut UNRWA funding in half, it went against the wishes of the current U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley. She said their funding should be cut completely, and she's right. UNRWA is not helping the people in these refugee camps. It is imprisoning them. So why does a group of former U.S. ambassadors think we should continue funding such an organization? Ms. Glick wrote, "The only logical explanation for their decision to sign and send the letter to Pompeo is that they want to perpetuate U.S. assistance to UNRWA because they like what it does. They think it is a good idea to doom Palestinians to perpetual misery and ensure that they will never, ever accept Israel's right to exist in secure borders." Their position tells us a great deal about the real U.S. policy toward Israel over the last 30 years. But I am encouraged that under President Trump, that policy is changing. In 1948, several Arab nations convinced the Arabs living in Israel to leave. They warned them that the Jews would massacre them. Of course, it was all propaganda. There were no massacres, but that fear created the ongoing Palestinian refugee crisis. Most people don't know about the other refugee crisis from that same period. In her monumental work, From Time Immemorial, the late Joan Peters wrote, "For every refugee, adult or child, in Syria, Lebanon, or elsewhere in the Arab world who compels our sympathy, there is a Jewish refugee who fled from the Arab country of his birth. For every Arab who moved to the neighboring lands, a Jew was forced to flee from a community where he and his ancestors may have lived for 2,000 years. To retaliate against the new state of Israel, Muslim nations made life impossible for the Jews in their midst. These Jews lost their property, security, dignity, and basic human rights. They faced persecution and death. They were forced from the lands of their birth. In 1948, there were more than 850,000 Jews living in the Arab world. Today, there are fewer than 29,000. Where are these Jews now? What happened to them? Where are their property and financial resources? Peters wrote, "The Arab world was virtually emptied of its Jews, and the fledgling Jewish state would bear the burden of its hundreds of thousands of Jewish Arab-born refugees, almost in secret." The plight of these Jews is almost never mentioned in the Palestinian refugee debate. Few people even know their story. That may be because every single one of those refugees was accepted, resettled, and provided for by the struggling Jewish state. And they did it without question or hesitation. Peters continued, "When the question of the Middle East refugees is raised, almost without exception, the response is, 'You mean the Palestinians, the Arabs, of course.'" It is as though the sad and painful story of the Arab-born Jewish refugees had been erased, their struggle covered over by revision of the pages of history. Let's look again at the basic history of the modern Middle East. The centuries-old and brutal Ottoman Empire collapsed at the end of World War I. That's when the League of Nations granted Britain the mandate for Palestine. Instead of giving the land to the Jews as they had promised, the British set aside 3/4 of the area for the nation we now call Jordan. That was the area east of the Jordan River. The remaining 1/4 of the land was set aside for Eretz Yisrael, meaning the land of Israel. Israel was given all the land west of the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. Obviously, the land west of the Jordan includes the West Bank. That area, known to Jews as Judea and Samaria, was then part of Israel. Jordan became an independent nation in 1946, Israel in 1948. During the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, Jordan took the West Bank by force. During the Six-Day War in 1967, Israel took it back. Somehow, the world community thought it was okay for Jordan to take the West Bank by force, but they saw it as a crime when Israel took it back. And remember, the Six-Day War was forced on Israel. They fought it to defend their very existence. The original two-state solution was to create the nation of Jordan for the Arabs who didn't want to live with the Jews in Israel. Somehow, that two-state solution has been lost to history. This may be our greatest opportunity, maybe even our last opportunity, to share the gospel of Jesus Christ before we're silenced by political correctness. The message that God has given me is more important now than it's ever been, for the church and for the nation. That's why I'm asking you to help me to expand our reach.
To support this program, send your tax-deductible gift to Hal Lindsey Media Ministries, P.O. Box 470470, Tulsa, Oklahoma 74147. You can also support this ministry online. Visit hallindsey.com or call 1-888-RAPTURE.
And thanks for being a vital part of my team. Al-Qaeda seems to be making a comeback of sorts. They never really went away, but for a while, ISIS seemed to be stealing all the headlines. Lately, Al-Qaeda has been active around the globe, including the United States. On July 1st, federal officials in Cleveland arrested Demetrius Pitts. He's an Al-Qaeda supporter accused of planning to bomb a 4th of July parade. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani has been in Europe on what the press calls a charm offensive. But from his point of view, the timing could not have been worse. Just as Rouhani began his tour, Belgium charged a husband and wife with preparing to bomb a Paris meeting of the National Council of Resistance of Iran. That's Iran's leading resistance group. At the same time, German officials arrested a diplomat from Iran's Austrian embassy. They say the Iranian diplomat had been aiding the husband and wife terrorist team. Meanwhile, inside Iran, the popular resistance movement is gaining strength. It helped them when the U.S. pulled out of the nuclear deal and began adding new sanctions. However, European nations seem to be holding on to the deal, but at a high cost to their moral credibility. One of Germany's top intelligence agencies recently admitted that the Iranians are making efforts to expand their conventional weapons arsenal through the production of weapons of mass destruction. The report defined these efforts as the illegal propagation of atomic, biological, and chemical weapons. Most nations consider Iran the world's leading sponsor of terrorism, and German intelligence is now accusing them of working to produce atomic, biological, and chemical weapons. Their terrorist friends around the world eagerly await these weapons. You would expect German officials to do a mea culpa, but they aren't. The Jerusalem Post reports German Chancellor Angela Merkel remains a strong proponent of the Iran nuclear deal and believes the accord will stop Tehran from obtaining a nuclear weapon device. She has not commented on the findings of her intelligence agencies that appear to contradict her view of the effectiveness of the nuclear deal. The German spy agency's report also includes Pakistan. That nation has been straddling the fence for years. Sometimes it fights terrorism, but more often it helps the terrorist. Intelligence agencies believe Pakistan already has the sixth largest nuclear arsenal in the world. As a nation, it has long been sympathetic to the kind of radical Islam that so often produces terrorism. Also, there are new reports that North Korea may be trying to deceive the U.S. about its nuclear program. NBC News reported that an anonymous U.S. intelligence official told them there is no evidence that they are decreasing stockpiles or that they have stopped their production. The official added, there is absolutely unequivocal evidence that they are trying to deceive the U.S. Personally, I don't put much trust in intelligence agents who leak to the press, but this could be true. North Korea has been practicing the art of deception for decades. It would be no surprise that they're still at it. Even if they intend to eventually give up their nuclear weapons, the more they possess, the more leverage they will have at the bargaining table. We don't know how this thing will turn out, but for now, at least the two sides are still talking. Bible prophecy warns about the kings from the east. East is the English translation of the Greek words Anatolos Helio. That literally means the rising of the sun. This was an ancient designation of Oriental races and nations. Revelation describes a vast horde of soldiers from the east crossing the Euphrates River into the Holy Land. The kings of the East army will be one of the world's great armies moving on Jerusalem as part of the War of Armageddon. Will this massive military force include North Korea? It could. The prophecy also seems to include the fastest rising of all current powers, China. Japan's Kyodo News Agency recently got hold of secret documents from the Chinese Central Military Commission. The internal documents claim to represent President Xi's thoughts on strengthening the armed forces. The Chinese document notes the increasing friction between China and the U.S. in the South China Sea. They indicate that the U.S. is in decline and they expect their military to overtake it. The documents say that China wants a military ready for fighting, capable of combat, and sure to win. They add, as we open up and expand our national interests beyond borders, we desperately need a comprehensive protection of our own security around the globe. Newsweek noted, the documents came to light as the People's Liberation Army Navy launched 2 advanced warships designed for surface warfare, long-range air defense, and anti-submarine operations. Folks, it's a dangerous world and it's getting worse. I could talk for hours about how bad things are. I'm not trying to depress you, but I am trying to impress on you how important it is to put your trust in God. This flimsy world system that finds itself in such deep trouble is not worthy of your hopes or dreams. It will let you down, but God remains faithful. His promises remain true. Hebrews chapter 13, verses 5 and 6 says, He himself has said, I will never desert you, nor will I ever forsake you, so that we confidently say, The Lord is my helper, I will not be afraid. What shall man do to me? The Lord said to Joshua something we all need to remember. Be strong and courageous. Do not tremble or be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. The 23rd Psalm is one of the Bible's most famous passages. Verse 4 says, Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Why not? The next phrase tells us why we don't need to fear evil. For thou art with me. Romans chapter 8, verse 31 asks, If God be for us, who can be against us? Do these promises apply to you? They can. They are part of the package of God's pardon and redemption. He's offering it to you right now. All you have to do is say yes to Him. Well, that's it for tonight, folks. God willing, I'll see you next week.
You've been watching the Hal Lindsey Report. To support this program, send your tax-deductible gift to Hal Lindsey Media Ministries, P.O. Box 470470, Tulsa, Oklahoma 74147. You can also support this ministry online. Visit hallindsey.com or call 1-888-RAPTURE.